Welcome to San Diego Market Movers. I'm your host, Valley, and today we have John Lieber, a real estate agent locally here in San Diego, and Matthew Neal, you are a fiduciary. So we kind of want to dive into what the process is for you, where you started in business, and how kind of like the real estate world and what you do for a living combined.
Yeah. Well, private professional fiduciaries in this, licensed profession in California, we are specifically handling people's trusts and estates. And there can be other areas such as conservatorships and guardianships. We're legally allowed to represent other people and handle their affairs for them, always with the interest of the client being foremost. Okay.
And they get in this position for many reasons, but one of the reasons is kind of like a probate, correct?
Well, you want to, probates are a part of it. There are lots of flavors of when someone passes away, how things can be handled. Probate is when there's basically no planning and you have to then just go through the court system. But if someone plans appropriately, then you have a trust, you can have a will, a couple ways of doing it. I work in all those spaces. Real estate agents like John can be used in all those spaces as well.
How does somebody come across and find you to hire you?
So there's two ways that a professional fiduciary usually gets involved. One is what we call future work, where someone's doing their estate plan, they're doing a trust, and they're saying, okay, when I get to a point of incapacity or I die, I want someone like a professional fiduciary to handle my affairs. And I'd say the four best clients of that are someone who has no children, someone who doesn't want to bother their children, someone that wants to keep the peace with their children, or someone that doesn't trust their children. Because we are a third party, we do this every day, it's our job, we're licensed and we're paid to do the job for these families. Someone can even plan perfectly. Like my father, personally, he had a trust put together, but then when it came down to it being executed after he passed away, my siblings just didn't get along, and it caused some hurt feelings. Even though my brother did everything by the book, it just did not go over well with my sister.
Right, and I feel like I personally have seen multiple situations where even if somebody has their will and trust set out perfectly, there's always some sort of internal family disagreement or litigation, and so hiring a fiduciary maybe alleviates any of that from ever happening.
Just getting a third party, someone who didn't steal the bicycle when they were 10 years old, helps.
It seems like there's always, when I've run across these situations too, you've got multiple siblings that have to agree on the sale, in my world, the sale of the house, which is what I'm handling. It seems like there's always one of the siblings that has done very well financially, and then a lot of times you have someone who hasn't, and it's hard to get those two to align because one of them really needs the money and the other one's like, I don't really care that much. I want to do it this way, and that's not my top priority. So I think in your world, stepping in and handling that, that's a huge benefit for somebody.
You just become very matter of fact, follow the rules of the trust, and and there's procedures to handle it.
And does the fiduciary hire the real estate agent, or the family decides who the realtor would be?
So usually it's the fiduciary.
Okay.
And I've actually been burned on going off family recommendations, because if they don't work in this space, if they have just different obligations, like in this one case, the family was contacted first by the real estate agent, even though the fiduciary in our office who I was working with, she's the one signing the paperwork. She's the one liable. In this case, it was a court-supervised trust. The family would be informed, like, hey, we have this offer. It's like, no. They don't decide this. It's the trustee. So someone who doesn't know how things work and have kind of that kind of other, kind of bias or obligation, it just doesn't work well. So, and you need to understand the space of what we're working with, in this case being court-supervised. Or in other cases, I would say with someone like a real estate agent, they have to know the exposure we have. Me, Matthew Neal, private citizen, selling a home, I can have someone come do work. I just know they're trustworthy, but maybe they're not licensed, maybe they're not insured. But if trustee Matthew Neal is doing it, I have to look out for the interest of the exposure on this trust, which something could happen. So when we're working with agents, they need to understand that, and they need to make sure that while maybe less convenient or not as fast or maybe a little more expensive, that level of due diligence has to be maintained.
That's one of the things that I've realized, not just for a client like you in this situation where you have to have someone that's a licensed contractor, whoever's working at the house, but for my clients in general, I can't really recommend non-licensed contractors to come into the house for that same reason. I mean, there is liability for everybody. And if it is a situation where it's just a landscaper, just someone doing a little bit of work, it's got to be very clear that the liability is on them. If they choose to hire that person, it's not my recommendation. So, I think that's an interesting nuance there, because you are exposed, and if someone gets hurt on the property, there's a lot of exposure for a lot of people, and because you're involved, you're a bigger target. Your company's a bigger target. So that's a good point.
I feel like there's a lot more to lose by not hiring a fiduciary too. I feel like just the mental and emotional capacity that it takes to manage dispersing, the trust the right way, and to avoid the infighting, things like that. It just makes the most sense to me to kind of outsource that, right? I mean, that's what the goal is to make sure it's fair and to keep a third party involved, so it's just sort of separates the emotion out of it.
Yeah, and I would say, as far as the real estate part of it's concerned, I'm sure you have some sway over whether a property needs court approval or not, or it really depends on how you fill out the paperwork and if you do it properly. Because if court approval is required on a property, that's a whole different animal, where you've got a lot higher deposit requirements. Timelines are different. You can get overbid when you actually go to court for the property to sell, and it's you're likely going to get a lot less money for the real estate asset if you have to do that.
Yeah.
Have you been into any unique situations where it was kind of a godsend that they hired a company like yours?
Oh yeah. I mean, right out. My best story that I have so far is a case where brother was the trustee. Mom passed away, and he went to his other brother and said, well, hey, I'm the trustee. I get to live in the house as long as I want. And he had misread the trust documents to come to that conclusion. And the other brother said, well, no, that's not what it says. So he went to court and he petitioned to have his brother removed as trustee. And I mean, it's been a mess. I mean, the home caught on fire. We're in this reconstruction phase, and there's a whole bunch of other just background liens on the property and avoiding bankruptcies, things that are happening. And this brother is like, all right, I don't have to do it. He's not getting, his brother that's in the home can't necessarily get directly mad at him because it's my job to be the grown up, the bad guy, to do that work and just say, hey, this is what the trust says. My job is to sell the home and distribute the funds accordingly. And, he called the police on me. He's called Adult Protective Services on me. And it's like, I just tell those people, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Yeah. And they're like, okay, have a nice day. Right. And that's you brought up another good point, is that the trust could be misinterpreted. And if you're not, you may be really well versed in real estate or finances, but you might misunderstand or misinterpret what that says and then be in a whole heap of trouble. And lose your position. So if you want to maintain control, save yourself some money by not hiring a fiduciary, you could be really actually doing yourself more harm. I mean, so many things in life, right, are the time versus money equation. I could sell a property, read every book, do all that stuff. I'm sure it's legally allowed, but I would much rather utilize a professional like John who does this every day. And that's also what we offer to people as well. Like, sure, you can close your father's and mother's trust and estate, but you got your day job, you've never done this before, and there's a lot of pitfalls where you can make mistakes along the way.
I hear regularly when someone's had to be the executor of the estate, how much work it was and how much time it just sucked from everything else in their life for the year or 2 years that they had to go through the process. It is very difficult. I being in part of it a little bit here and there in my life, I understand. I definitely not something I would want to do. So if somebody is just curious and wants to ask some questions to see how they can maybe implement what you do in their process, how do they find you?
So professional fiduciaries, there's a state website, the Fiduciary Bureau of California. There's also a state organization called the Professional Fiduciary Association of California, PFAC. That's a good way to find people in your area, if you're looking for a specific, older, younger, male, female. You can go on the website and find people, and then just call them and ask them questions about like how to incorporate us into the process. We can be, I don't know if I fully answered your question earlier, we can be brought in as part of planning, or what we call kind of more immediate work, and that would be like the example of where the brother, did a lawsuit to get his brother removed, and now we need a trustee fiduciary now. So those are the kind of two ways that we get in. So either situation, in my group, we don't charge anything until we're actually acting. That could be 25 years in the future. I've got cases that I may not take on because I may be retired by then, even though I've got 25 years of work ahead of me. So I'm always happy to have a phone call and just talk to people and point them in the right direction.
And if they're a client of John's, John can kind of assess their situation and then refer them over to a company like you.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea to do.
Yes.
So if you are an active client or a past client of John's, make sure you reach out, because it's better to plan ahead than in reverse, and get your estate kind of set up so that you don't fall into this pitfall. I think you can lose potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars if you don't do this right.
The thing about probate, kind of the way I describe it, is you lose all control. It becomes this very formulaic process of, this is what the probate law says about where your money goes. So I'm administering a probate right now. The gentleman died. His sisters were, I think, there when he passed away from cancer. But when it comes to the law, the money to his property is going to his, I think, estranged daughter. I don't think they had any real relationship.
Oh, wow.
So even though the sisters were close and involved, and I know he cared for his sisters and wanted to help them, the law says it goes to the daughter.
Yeah.
He made no he left no documentation that his decision was otherwise.
Wow. And I bet there's multitude of situations like that.
Yeah. A lot of times people just don't plan, and then time passes and it's too late to plan. So, I mean, the time is yesterday, but it's now to when you get this stuff set up.
A slight success story. This gentleman didn't put his home in a trust. I'm not quite sure why, but he did have a will, and he did name a professional fiduciary. So unfortunately, he passed away alone. The gardener found him in his home, but he did have this document already set up saying, okay, who he wanted to be in charge and where he wanted his money to go. And so it will go to a charity of his choice that he felt really passionate about.
Yeah.
So, that's good that he at least made that decision. Now, because it was just a will, we are going through a court, and it's taking longer, and it's going to cost probably more in the long run. But at least he, even though he didn't have anyone in his life, did make that decision, and the money went where he wanted.
Yeah. I like that. That's a good success story to end on. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Well, I feel like you guys are a wealth of knowledge. We just barely scratched the surface and all the things that we could touch on and talk about. So if somebody's looking to maybe just ask some questions, I feel like it's a good idea to reach out to John, reach out to Matthew. They can direct you in the right area and maybe just give you some advice, or you can retain them. So I think it's a great, you guys are a good duo here.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie.
So much information. I feel like we need to get out to them. There's just not enough time to touch on it all. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, John, for bringing him on our show. And we can share a little bit more later.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on
All right,
today.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all.